Today, I have the immense pleasure of speaking with Paola De Luca, a visionary and multifaceted figure in the world of luxury and jewelry design.
Dreams are possibles, and what man can conceive, man can achieve. So I believe that growing up in Rome, doing art school between when I was skipping school with my friends, I would be in Via Condotti, which was like next to my school, where Bulgari was and Fendi was. So I grew up with these elegant streets where people from all over the world would come and live la dolce vita. I think that futurism impacted me when I was in my teenage, and I was completely into reading about Marinetti, Boccioni. I was reading from poetry, Dadaism, how it started. It was all associated to disruption, historical disruption. I was very gutsy. I would not be scared of just introducing myself to companies and so. But immediately I got the sense that I needed some kind of business sense and a commercial sense, and I was lacking. And so I felt that I needed to move to a big market. And at that time, in the 90s, it were like the United States. And New York, for some reason, I just felt it was calling me. I don't know, I felt I was a New Yorker at heart. When you do your own research as an artist, as a designer, as a creative person, you are trying to express your own inner research into the outer world. But when you are basically servicing society with your creativity, I think that the subject is society. Creative projects also include strategies for companies, really tapping into what is next for a company, entering the world of innovation. So we're very strong with innovation.
To me, you are the rock star of creativity and trends forecasting, so thank you for singing your blues with me on Lux Friends.
I'm Carlo Pignataro, and welcome to a special live episode of Lux Friends recorded at the latest edition of Vicenza Oro, one of the world's most prestigious jewelry fairs. Today, I have the immense pleasure of speaking with Paola De Luca, a visionary and multifaceted figure in the world of luxury and jewelry design. Paola's career is nothing short of extraordinary, spanning over 3 decades and marked by her ability to predict and shape trends that have influenced the global jewelry industry. Growing up in the culturally rich city of Rome and later moving to New York, Paola worked alongside iconic figures like Carla Fendi, experiences that shaped her unique approach to design and trend forecasting. In 2002, she co-founded TJF Group, a pioneering company in jewelry trend forecasting, where I had the privilege of being part of an incredible journey. Today, Paola leads the Futurist Ltd, a strategic advisory firm that continues to push boundaries in the luxury and design sectors. Paola is also the creative force behind Trend Vision Jewelry Plus forecasting and the Jewelry Trend Book, which have become essential guides for the industry. Her work extends beyond forecasting. She curates exclusive events like the Wonderland event here at Vicenza Oro, which help shape the future of the jewelry world. In today's conversation, we'll explore Paola's early inspiration in Rome, her move to New York, and her work with legendary brands like Fendi and many more. We'll also delve into her insights on sustainability, the future of luxury, and the evolving trends that will shape tomorrow's jewelry industry. On a personal note, Paola is not only a dear friend, but also a constant source of inspiration for me, both professionally and personally. I'm excited to share her remarkable journey with you today. So, without further ado, let's dive into the world of jewelry and luxury with Paola De Luca.
Paola, it's wonderful to be here with you in Vicenza.
It is fantastic. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you, Carlo, for having me.
It's a pleasure, Paola. We had a long day of many things, and I love to gather now and get to know you more. As I said during the introduction, you are a multifaceted person and professional in the luxury industry. Creative director, or just only a trend forecaster, or only a business person would be limiting. So my intention today is to get you know more from the beginning, to get to know your journey in the luxury industry, in the creative industry. So let me ask you the first question. You grew up in Rome. You were born and grew up in Rome, a city known for its history, art, culture, and so forth. How did this city and its culture influence your early work?
Thank you, Carlo, for this amazing question, which makes me in a way emotional, but at the same time, I'll try to be very brief. I grew up in Rome and I studied art. My father was a journalist, and then I think influenced a lot my being, because I was studying in his office, and he's actually in the newspaper. So I was studying art, so I wanted to be a designer. My attraction was fashion. I wanted to be a fashion designer and work in the fashion world. But at the same time, I was doing my homework in a newspaper. That's when I started being in the archive since I was a teenager. So I would study whatever it was my topic and get ready for my basically homework in the archive of a newspaper. So I would go through all the archive and go through many articles from newspapers from all over the world, or magazine or books, just to get ready on a particular topic. That could be literature, that could be art, that could be, so I could study Pirandello in Italy, or let's say the Kennedys. I wouldn't go just through the books, I would go through the archive and the real article that the press at that time was writing, and I was not just reading one particular, let's say, political direction, but I would have a broad perspective of everything. I think that moment in life really left an impact on me, because I was extremely fascinated by studying, exploring, and researching. It was just something that was a passion. And the same was associated to art. I was lucky enough that my professor at the art school, they were like critics, art critics, and some of them, they were specialized in either Caravaggio or Futurism. And there was one particular teacher, her name was Esther Cohen, and she's actually someone that was actually, she also worked for the Met and organized, I don't remember in which years, an anthology, a big exhibition at the Metropolitan Museum on Futurism. I think that Futurism impacted me when I was in my teenage, and I was completely into reading about Marinetti, Boccioni. I was reading from poetry, Dadaism, how it started. It was all associated to disruption, historical disruption. So I believe that growing up in Rome, doing art school, between let's say when I was skipping school with my friends, I would be in Via Condotti, which was like next to my school, where Bulgari was and Fendi was. So I grew up with these elegant, streets where people from all over the world would come and live la dolce vita. And the Piazza di Spagna, which are known as the Spanish Step, in the spring at these azalea, this flower show that would be on the steps, and we had models coming up from Piazza Mignanelli, from the Valentino Atelier. So it was really special, and that was my playground. So my playground was going from my school in Via Ripetta, the first art school in Rome, walking through the center of Rome, where I would have all these amazing brand and atelier and art celebrities. And then I would go to my father's office / newspaper. Actually, he was a sports journalist, so he was not political or anything. So I also grew up with basketball. So I was following the Italian A League, the Prime League, and at the same time I was studying. So it was a very special time. I think that's strongly affected. In addition, my father was a traveler, so he always gave me this concept of having a broad perspective, vision, a global concept of the world. And I would be exposed to many newspapers, because when you grow up in a newspaper, you don't have one opinion. You have the opportunity to read 15 newspapers, and again in different political directions, but also perspective, and so on. So that, I think, really enriched me. It opened my mind, and I think is part of who I am today.
It reflects in your very open-minded approach to life. Now that I know you well, Paola, you mentioned Rome was your playground.
Yeah.
That's where you grew up mentally and physically, but it was not your business ground. This is not where your career took off. It actually took off in New York. Can you tell us the story? How you moved from Rome to New York and what happened there?
Well, I always loved Rome and I still love Rome, but to me, Rome was limited. And I think that when I was hungry for the world, and when I finished my, let's say, studying in Rome, I felt that I was very ambitious. I wanted to be financially independent from my parents, and I wanted to start working, as a designer and as a creative person in the field. I won a scholarship that allowed me to basically start designing jewelry, and I was not only designing, but I was making jewelry physically with my hands. I was very good in creating prototypes. So I think also my family, from my mom background, they were in fashion. So the women, they were entrepreneur and they were in fashion. So I believe I had this amazing skill of maybe presenting. I was very gutsy. I would not be scared of just introducing myself to companies and so. But immediately I got the sense that I needed some kind of business sense and a commercial sense, and I was lacking. And so I felt that I needed to move to a big market. And at that time, in the 90s, it were like the United States. And New York, for some reason, I just felt it was calling me. I don't know, I felt I was a New Yorker at heart. And then I'm not going to tell you all my adventures, because I had few.
Can you imagine?
I was deported. I don't know if I ever told you that.
I never knew.
I was deported. I was deported because I came as a student just to start, getting, because I didn't know. So I started collaborating with companies, designing jewelry.
And you were not allowed.
And I was very young. I was 22 years old. But, and basically I started freelancing. And then on my way back to the US, I didn't know. I didn't have my ticket round trip back to Italy, but back to the US. So immigration stopped me. And they just said, hey, you cannot work here. You have to, first you have to have a round trip ticket back to your country. Anyway, they sent me back. And, but then, of course, I was able to come back because I was just a naive, young girl that wanted to have an international experience. I completed my studies at FIT, and that's when finally, after I finished FIT, Fendi was looking for a designer. At that time, they were launching a jewelry and watches collection. And their licensee was in the United States. And at that time, I was promoting myself largely with creative director and director of design in New York. So I was a young designer. And so people started, when Fendi was looking for someone, they said, there is this young designer from Rome that she's studying here and she's finishing. She's very talented. And I interviewed and I just, I got the job. And that was my first real job. I was 23, 24. And that's when my career started.
Tell me more about your collaboration with Fendi. If I remember correctly, you collaborated with Carla Fendi.
Yeah,
Did you?
I was hired by them. And we were under the creative direction of Karl Lagerfeld. At that time, he was the creative director. And then when finally, and the first collection that we launched is the iconic collection called the Pasta Collection. So we really use pasta component as design element for the entire collection. And I was young, of course. There was another designer, which was a senior designer. And then when we had to launch the collection, Carla Fendi came. And that's when, I met her personally, and I was honored because I worked with her under her wing, when there was the launch of the collection, also because she didn't speak English. I was the only one that could speak English and Roman with her, meaning with the Roman accent. So she felt at home, also because I was young, and she felt she was very nice with me. So it was an amazing experience. I realized only later in my life how fortunate I was in living that kind of environment.
Paola, before I jump to the next question, which also involves a certain leap in time. New York, what has New York meant to you? Because you lived there for quite a few years.
Yeah.
And what have you learned from New York that you still treasure and use in your career?
Well, I'll start with saying, if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere.
Yes, as the song goes.
Yeah. like Frank Sinatra saying. Well, first of all, it was a special moment, honestly, in history. It was like the 90s. It was very wealthy time. Everything was exploding, economy, fashion, everything was amazing. And I was in the center of the world in my 20s. Sex and the City, I was living it. I was not in the TV series. We were out every night. I was hungry for nightlife, for fashion, for underground culture, for gender fluid communities, and I was there at that time. To me, it strongly impacted my life. But it's important to say that New York has always been extremely ambitious, very high standard, and very competitive. So at that time, in order to be, after Fendi and after I went to Salvatore Ferragamo, I collaborated with Fulvia Ferragamo Visconti, I decided to be an independent consultant and not to have a job. Because to me, being creative meant to be on the streets, to be in the clubs, to be on the catwalks, to be traveling back and forth in Europe. Even New York for me after a while was not enough. So I needed to live in New York, fly to London, fly to Paris, fly to Munich, Milano. So I immediately, in my mid-20s, late 20s, I started being global, even though I was in New York. And I think that high standard of New York and the competition made me very aggressive and a perfectionist. And the only way to succeed in New York was over-delivering. So my standards were very high. So I wanted just to impress my clients and even me to impress. And the standard was, if I was impressed, I would make my client impressed. And so I was very tough. And I was researching all the time globally in order to present beautiful collections. At that time, I was designing a lot. I was designing jewelry and accessories. And so to me, it was important not only designing, but presenting the project. So the presentation were almost as important as the design itself, because I wanted to sell the concept of luxury. I was not just selling a drawing. I would sell collections, I would sell presentation, I would sell a style. And that's what I think made a difference.
So is this what made you move from the role of a designer into a broader spectrum of creative things that you do today?
Well, at that time, I was also working for an important company that Forbes magazine at that particular time in the 90s identified as the biggest Italian company exporting globally.
Such as?
Uno
Uno.
And I started at that time collaborating with them, and then I became their creative global design director. And through that experience, I had one particular, CEO, which actually at that time it was basically looking for, he called it a muse. He called it someone that could lead the other designers and the design department. So he requested a report. He wanted a report and a research that could be impactful, but also with a serious research that could brief the designer, the marketing, and also the model makers. So I started researching, and I found trend forecasting in the fashion industry. So I started going to Première Vision in Paris. I started, learning about trend forecasting for fashion. Of course, I had to translate textile into jewelry component, into gold chains, gemstones, diamonds, finishes, textures, weight, technology, which was completely different than that textile. So what happened was I had to basically understand what macro trends were and bring it down to micro trends. Now we're talking, what is a macro trend? The macro environmental change or climate change is a macro trend. At that particular time, entering digital era was a macro trend. How is impacting design? So I had to do that in terms of identifying design direction and then translating it into our particular industry, which was polished gold versus brushed gemstones. So I had to do that. And then it became very important because companies, they started giving me projects more and more in the research area. And I was making more money. That's the truth. I mean, I've learned that the strategic part of my job was more profitable than just designing. And so that's why I shifted into research and strategy. Then in time, basically gave me more opportunities and more prestigious and impactful projects.
No, in fact, I heard you say many times that strategy is as important as design. Or let me put it this way, strategy should influence design, and of course, design should influence strategy. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, yes. To me, yes. I mean, it's like, you see, when you do your own research as an artist, as a designer, as a creative person, you are trying to express your own inner research into the outer world. But when you are basically servicing society with your creativity, I think that the object should be, the subject is society and it is environment. So if we are creating a product, if you are an architect and you are designing for people, you should be aware of people's needs. And it's the same for jewelry and luxury. So it's important to understand our environment, society changes, cultural shifting, geopolitical turmoil that we are living right now. It's very important because it's impacting our, consumer attitude, our consumer sentiment, but also our needs and even the way we are expressing. So I was always, maybe because of my background when I grew up, my question is always why this is happening. Why people is layering jewelry versus just buying one piece? Why people is now wearing 5 earrings, 3 in 1 ear? Why people is not wearing matchy jewelry? Why gender fluidity? The question was always why. And when you go to the root of a phenomenon, you know how it will evolve. And you have more power and control over one particular trend. Now, it doesn't mean that one particular trend it's meaningful for your company, but understanding the market, it means you are going to be a good player. So the best team in sports, they do strategy. They study their opposite team, and they do a strategy how to beat or over, and that's the same. So how can we design a collection if we don't know the geopolitical environment? I mean, what's happening in Italy, even Italian consumer or European consumer are different than Chinese consumer. And even Chinese consumer, large cities from smaller cities, north to south, east to west. So when we talk about, Europeans, it's like within our country, within Italy, we change dramatically from north to south, city to smaller cities. And even within the geographic location, we have social differences. So that's what I'm into. I'm into understanding our environment and then sit down and start creating. Otherwise, you cannot. And believe it or not, this process inspires me. It is inspiring people because now the world becomes an inspiration. The world is an inspiration. And in a way, you have your job, your craft becomes more meaningful because it's more important. It's not just designing an object, but it's creating a need, it's tapping into something higher, to a higher frequency. And in a way, that's what I'm into.
I love it. And I so much agree with you. I mean, especially when you said that you're looking for a reason why a certain phenomenon is happening. And in such a polarized time. So, fast forward a few years, it was time to leave New York and come back to Europe. And that's where you started. You founded TJF Group, Trend Jewelry Forecasting. Yeah. I've been there with you for a few years. It was an amazing experience. I will always remember it as the rock and roll experience of my life, where everything was so creative and rock and roll. I mean, everything seemed possible at the time. Tell me more about this experience. How did you start it? Why did you leave New York? What brought you there?
Well, fast forward means 20 years later, after I left New York, I decided to relocate back to Italy/Europe because I honestly was missing my parents. I mean, it was a personal decision. And I left Italy, I was very young, and I missed being, let's say, close to my family. So I decided to have, as an epicenter, Italy, and travel the world. So at that time, I met TJF Group, which was a London-based company, which they were like specialized in metals and research, etc. And they owned Basel magazine. So they were the publisher of Basel magazine, which was like the famous, Basel Fair. I mean, it was like Basel Fair was like the largest, most important global jewelry fair and watches in the world. Yeah. So they were the publisher. At that particular time, early 2000, the world was changing strongly. I mean, when we entered the millennium, everybody felt, especially TJF Group, among others, that there was a shifting, a cultural shifting, an historical shifting, and companies needed to shift and innovate, and because we were facing disruption. And they saw my project. I was doing already a trend book. I was doing research. They felt there was something that was missing, and they could help companies to be, educated and basically update to the new millennium and change. It was like a mentality, really. And basically, we co-founded together with TJF Group, Trends Jewelry Forecast, TJF Group. And then later, like a year and a half later, I asked my friend at that time, which was still friends, Paola Novembri, to join me to develop, let's say, the commercial aspect, because I am a researcher. I don't define myself a commercial person. I'm not, even though, of course, as an entrepreneur, I have to sell, do contract, deal with clients. But at the same time, my real passion is studying, is strategy, is analyzing data, and it is creativity. I like to manage, curate, creative process and projects as well. But at that time, so Paolo came on board, and basically we became partners, and the objective was really to develop a research company and creative company to be consulting around the globe. And that's when also you came on board. We were working globally, as you remember, and it was a fascinating time.
It was a fascinating time. What was the biggest contribution of TJF Group, in your opinion? It was one of a kind. Let's be honest. It was really one of a kind, very unique in the panorama at the time. What was its biggest contribution?
I think our holistic approach. I think the fact that, like I said, we are very holistic, we are creative people, we are design thinkers. That now lately in the last 10 years, design thinking became very popular. And design thinking is really, it's not about the act of design, but really thinking creatively and really mixing creative vision with science and methodology and apply it. And so when you do that, a scientist is a creative person, a mathematician is creative. It's like people think it's like so this is finance people are creative. Investors are creative. If you're not creative, if you don't have creativity is not related to the act of designing or doing something with your hands. Creativity is a vision. Those are people that they imagine the impossible and make it possible. And that's what we are. I am a designer of life. I'm a designer of project. I'm a designer of visions. And I'll do anything is in my power to make it happen. Of course, I have my own skills, and my skills are visuals, images, analyzing, is design, is line, is textures, is colors. But mostly is emotions. I sell emotion, and luxury today is emotion. But emotion at the end of the day is food. The emotion is selling a trip is selling technology. Through technology is changing emotion. So at the end, we are attracted by something because of a color, because of a design, because at the end of the day is also generating business. That's where I get excited. I'm in love with this. And I think the TJF Group was about that, was about having a vision and getting it and sharing this vision with companies, helping them to put it together and become and execute it. So it was about the vision with steps. Methodology is about research, analysis, strategy, execution. That was it.
Yes. Can I give you my 2 cents?
Yes.
I'm not saying this was the biggest contribution of TJF Group in absolute terms, but certainly was the biggest contribution for me. An approach where everything is possible. You may not know how to do it yet, but you'll find a way. That's what I learned during those years with you.
But it's true.
Yes.
It's true. It's like making something possible. And I think the blessing, even though it's like, or the talent, let's call it something more tangible, is really having a vision and tapping into that energy and having an holistic approach. I like the word holistic because it's not just being into, channels, but like mixing, is in being multi-channel or omni-channel. The world became omni-channel, and that's why I love digital era, because we're really surfing, and navigating digital era, from the metaverse to phygital retailing to AI, which is augmented imagination. That's what we love.
We have less boundaries.
Less boundaries.
So, Paola, after you and Paolo parted ways, the TJF Group evolved, so to speak, into the Futurist Ltd.
Yes.
Tell me more about this transition and what the Futurist is today.
Well, the Futurist is an agency. We are basically working on creative intelligence, and creative intelligence stands for research, analysis, strategies, but most important, creative projects. And creative projects also include strategies for companies, really tapping into what is next for a company, entering the world of innovation. So we're very strong with innovation, with project. Definitely we work with changing the dynamic of business. That's what we're strong at. And our clients go from Salon, Fiera di Vicenza being one of our partners, with governmental organization. We do a lot of educational workshop, and also we educate companies. Also, we do consulting. And our approach is similar to basically TGF Group. I would say is pretty much the same. But of course, I work mostly in the creative end of the world, of basically the business. And by creative, we mean from rethinking a strategy for a company, in planning a new distribution, but also working on new semantic for communication, marketing campaign. So AI is bringing new way of working, new way of communicating, is creating new paradigms. So this is what we are doing. This is what we love, is pushing the boundaries to get to the next level. And for us, it's very exciting. And sometimes we just create project without just because we love it and we believe it, and we present it to potential client and they love it.
A private client. Why should a company call you, and why shouldn't they call you? Or who shouldn't call you?
I like that. I like who shouldn't. People that they don't have a vision and they just want to just make money for the sake of making it should not call us. We work with companies that they have vision, and vision stands for, of course, being investor and thinking on your ROI, of course. But at the same time, people that has passion, people that company that goes beyond the present, people that have a strategy in the medium and long term. That's the people that should call us.
One of the outcomes of your work is the jewelry trend book, a forecasting publication that you've been publishing for how many years now?
Now we had 25 years.
25
but
years.
I started in the early 90s, so I've been doing it for nearly 30 years.
And this is a household publication in the jewelry industry.
Yes.
I say it.
Yes.
And tell me more about it. Tell our audience more about it. What is the trend book about? What makes it a publication worth studying more than reading?
Yeah, well, I think the trend book for me, it's really like the example of how we work. It's a methodology. I mean, the trend book is divided into three, let's say, main chapters. One is an overview of what's happening today in the world from macro perspective, macro trends. That includes also emerging phenomena in general and how emerging phenomena are impacting our industry in particular. So, but we don't just focus on our industry. Of course, like I said earlier, if we are facing political turmoil, and wars that are impacting gold fluctuation because of whatever reason between the US and China. Just today there was a conference about this, and then it's also influencing our industry. Therefore, design is changing because the price of gold is high. Designer, they have less availability on gold. It's very expensive, consumer. So now design is changing to adapt. Also, the alloy is changing. We went from 18K being the average. Now even in Italy, designers are proposing 14K or 9K. And so as every war, Second World War also, gold was like limited. And so designers started proposing 14K, et cetera, et cetera. So there are things that they're happening, and what the trend book does is really explaining the environmental changes and the retail imagination, for instance. The retail world is becoming more and more into experiences, experiential, immersive experiences. So the retail world is being impacted. Those are like important things. So this is what basically work on overview on what's happening, emerging phenomenon, our market, our specific market being the jewelry industry, what's happening with lab grown versus natural diamond. And last but not least, the forecast. And basically the forecast is kind of projecting what's happening now in the next 2 years ahead. So it's a methodology that we show the industry to really follow a path, not just being, it's kind of educated creativity versus uneducated creativity. And once again, creativity is not just about designing, but thinking what's next. How can I be a leader? How can I speed up? How can I have a better marketing campaign, a digital campaign? How the digital world is evolving, how bloggers, influencers are now, how are they evolving and becoming something new? We are into this. We are interested into changing, adapting, and creating something better.
I love it. I will repeat it for our audience to remember it. Educated creativity versus uneducated creativity. So, speaking of trends, and you're now presenting 2026, what are the trends that are going to impact the luxury industry more and that our audience has to be aware of, in a nutshell?
Well, I mean, I think that, there are a couple of, if I have to make it simple, I think I think right now we are really living and witnessing like the opposite, it's like in time of crisis, it's always like that. There are the innovator and they are the conservative. And the innovator, they're pushing, the conservative are like, they're fearful. So right now it's a time of nostalgia, and looking back at, the previous centuries, vintage jewelry, antiques, and so on, and then we are pushing it to the next level. So in the jewelry industry, but also in design in general, and the environment, there is a lot of attraction for our past history, and history is not only Europeans or only North America, but we're talking about India, we're talking about the Middle East, we're talking about China. So every culture is exploring their own past, their own history. And in a way, they are rediscovering their past. So what does it mean in jewelry? That there is great collectors are going back in purchasing and finding, heirlooms or antique pieces, and or designers are reproducing or reinterpreting the past. That could be from craftsmanship that is being lost or is disappearing or is being celebrated in new ways. But at the same time, it's not the reproduction of the past and it's not mannerism, but it's a kind of a celebration of our own identity as culture in a world of globalization, in a world of gaming, in a world of fear of dilution and loss of our own identities and cultures. So it's kind of finding a pride in our culture and expressing it through our jewelry, fashion, object, design to be recognized. But at the same time, it's been mixed and blended with the present and future. So the way we style jewelry is very interesting. So there is an attraction for our heritage in general, and at the same time we are seeking for innovation through pushing the boundaries of design, of lightness, with technology, metal becoming colored, PVD, new technology, new alloys, new material, recycled, circular economy, circular design. So, like you said, everything is more, there is no rules, everything is blending, but in a way we start with the seed of who we are. You know what I mean? It's like heritage, it starts from there, but then it ends up completely in a new planet. And I think it's a fantastic time in history, honestly. We're going to look back 100 years from now, maybe we're going to be floating in the universe, and for sure, at least I will. And we're going to see how incredible the beginning of this century, which is like now we were in the 20s of the year 2000, which is the equivalent of the 20s and 30s of the previous centuries where we were like in deco time, you know? It's not a coincidence that sometimes certain design movements are back, revised with the twist, because there are similar phenomena, the war, industrial age, environmental changes, society change, new civil rights. At that time, you remember...
History rhymes.
History rhymes.
History rhymes.
Yeah.
I agree with you. And and we are at a crossroad. I mean, we have big challenges and great opportunities ahead of us. Paola, you mentioned technology, big changes and everything. I want to ask you this question. Technology in particular is evolving very fast and is changing the world at a very fast pace.
Yeah.
Is the luxury industry coping with this fast pace? And is there a segment in the luxury industry that is coping more or less than the others? I don't know. Jewelry versus fashions versus watches versus hospitality. What's your observation?
I think that the world, it is, is challenged, but is definitely coping with the changes. Also because of new generation. I mean, it's like, even though the jewelry industry seems a little bit always more conservative compared to the fashion world, for instance, because of obvious reasons. I mean, it's like the intrinsic value of the material themselves, like gold, diamonds, precious stones, and so on. And also, the jewelry world is more embedded with, kind of family businesses that they are usually in the sector for like generations, from India to the Middle East to China, even Europe, and so on. I think they do, and I think we are at the beginning of this change. And of course, compared to the clothing, we are maybe a little bit, we are not as up to date yet. But this blending is merging. So I mean, for sure, from a design perspective and from like even a creative, let's say, area of the business, I think we are already there, because the designers, they're always pushing it. But I think also AI is already, it's especially in India, but also in North America. India is a very big player in the jewelry industries. Mm-hmm. They're influencing a lot, in the platform, in the use of data, etc. But also Europe and Italy, they are big players in it. So I think we are already living it, and the resistance that we have to live with that, because it's going to change. And like in every let's say, big revolution, historical revolution. So we're facing a very important time in history. Mm.
As we're heading towards the end of this very interesting conversation, in my opinion, where you have given a lot of, as we say in Italian, carne al fuoco, food for thought, for creative designers and business people, especially in the luxury industry, but not only, I would say. Paola, I know by experience that you are a very generous person and a very generous professional. You make people around you grow, both at a professional and personal level. You're not afraid of sharing your knowledge, your experience, what you know, what you have discovered. So let's just do something practical for the people out there, the young designers or the young creatives or the young people who dream of a career in the jewelry industry, in the luxury industry, in the creative industry. What would you like to tell them?
Well, first of all, I would like to say to be generous, because creativity, it is a spring of energy that the more you give out, the more is going to come back to you, in general. I believe in empathy, in being open, in not being fearful of, covering, protecting your creativity. You should be protecting your creativity, but it's also important to be generous with your emotion, with your ideas, protected, being smart. That is very important. And of course, to me, it is be curious, work hard. I mean, regardless of the talent that you might have. I mean, I was talented when I was young. Yes, I was. But I realized that hard work really took it to the next level. When you have Ronaldo, a big soccer player, the truth, yes, they're talented, but they work very hard. So when you are working in the Champions League, everybody's talented. To make it to the next level, you have to work. But work means with methodology, with an idea, with strategy, not just working hard for the sake of working hard, but really working with a thought, really having a strategy and a vision. And I believe, and I call dreams projects. Everything is possible, like we were doing at TJF. Dreams are possibles, and what man can conceive, man can achieve.
Wow. Paola De Luca, to me, you are the rock star of creativity and trends forecasting, so thank you for singing your blues with me on Lux Friends.
Grazie, Carlo. Grazie for having me.